Hello, everyone. Let's start the webinar. I'm Jana, and I do work in Scandiveb. And Scandiveb is a digital agency that is building e-commerce websites, mainly on Magento platform, but we are good with other platforms as well. And also, Scandiveb is having a growth team that is working with data and improving user experience. So what do we do? Basically, we are doing tasks related to data tracking setup. We do data analysis, and then we prepare data-driven insights that can improve the conversion rates of e-commerce stores and other kind of websites. As a big part of our daily life is related to data analysis, so we started to work with Google Data Studio, and as we do have kind of a lot of experience with the tool. In this webinar, I would like to share the lessons that I have learned in time with working this tool. This webinar will be about like how to make good reports in Data Studio, but it will be more focused on strategic decisions to take when planning the report and visual principles to follow when building the report. This webinar won't be about technical details and functionalities of the tool. For that, we would need a different kind of format, and therefore, and actually everything starts with a good planning. Therefore, let's start with this topic. And yes, our plan for today. First of all, I will shortly tell what is Google Data Studio, why do you use this tool, and afterwards I will go through questions and ideas I do usually follow when planning reports and visual principles I try to include in the reports when I'm building them. So what is Google Data Studio? And it is a reporting tool that turns your data into informative and easy to read dashboards. The definition is pretty straightforward. There's nothing much more to add. Maybe what you need to know is that also it's you don't have to pay for using it. Yeah, it's about data visualizations. So how it works, basically there is a data source, for example, Google Analytics. There's a connector and which connects your data source with a Google Data Studio report. And I strongly suggest to remember this scheme because there are a lot of third-party tools that provide different kind of data, but they might not have connector. Even though Google Data Studio is providing more than 200 connectors, the amount of those data third-party tools is higher. Therefore, you might need to look for alternatives. And every alternative might take a bit more time to connect your data source to the report. However, with those 200 connectors, you definitely can find a connector that will support your data source. So why to use Google Data Studio? The first and the biggest advantage, of course, is the high amount of different data visualizations. The second thing is that you can include more than 2 dimensions in one chart. This highly correlates with Google Analytics, which we do use every day. And there are specific kind of reports, for example, user behavior with using events on the websites. In traditional Google Analytics report, you can add only 2 dimensions. However, a standard custom event is defined by 3 dimensions. That for if you want to view a specific event in analytics, you need to create a custom report there, or you can create a custom report in Data Studio and add some visualizations. Another advantage is this automatic data update, which, however, depends from the data source. Then it's great that it offers data blending functionality, which allows to combine multiple data sources. One example could be, for example, data from Facebook ads and Google ads in the same table. The example we are using is, for example, with content related dimensions and metrics, let's say landing page, and in the same table, we can see the data as from all users, as from specific segment, for example, organic traffic, and everything will be combined in the same table. And finally, the reports are easy to share. You don't have to provide access to this specific data source. You can provide access only to the report for the reader. And here you can see a visual example how the usual data table looks in Google Analytics. It's like a lot of data points, and the same data points are added here in dashboard in Google Data Studio. So it's way more easier to find which, for example, is the main device type by sessions, where the most of transactions are made, and how do the same information can be found when it comes to traffic acquisition. And this chart and these tables charts are used information from Google Analytics sample data. It's accessible like in every Data Studio report when you will start to build it. So there is nothing to hide. So let's start to discuss the main topic, and it was how to build reports in Google Data Studio. This is the exact phrase I used when I started to work with the tool. It was some years ago, and at that time the internet was full with articles regarding how the tool works and what kind of functionalities it has. It did not cover topics as the strategic planning or visual principles, and therefore I ended up with a huge report. It consisted of around 35 dashboards. So you can imagine the time the reader of the report needed to spend to gather some kind of insights or just understand the general overview of the website performance. It had like as many charts as possible. I started to work with this tool recently when I started to work with Google Analytics, and therefore for me it was amazing that there's a tool that can provide me so many data points. Therefore I wanted to include everything in my dashboards, like everything. And also limited space in a single dashboard was not an obstacle for me to exclude something and maybe create another dashboard. I thought that everything should be in a single dashboard if it relates to the topic. And also I just recently started to work with the analytics at that time. I was not so focused on specific definitions of dimensions and metrics and how to combine them. Therefore, I thought if there's a possibility to combine them, then why not to do that? However, after time, I understand that there are pretty big rules behind how to combine them, and therefore, I strongly suggest you to check if the combination you want to add it will really give you true data and not false information. Here you can see an example of kind of like a replica how a dashboard then would look like. It kind of looks good, but in the same time, if I would ask you to find a specific insight based on this dashboard, you would need to spend way more time than if I would take into account some visual principles. And the reason of this is because that everything is so colorful. that you don't need to that you don't know what is the main focus area in the report. And because of my mistakes, I suggest to rename the topic and say it as how to build insightful and easy to read reports in Google Data Studio. And this will be my kind of guide, a step-by-step guide, which I suggest all of you to follow when building reports in Google Data Studio. It's a 3-step guide, and it's pretty simple. The first step is about planning. It's about defining the purpose of the report, about data to include. The second step is finally about building the report and, for example, how and where to place the data. And the third step is about QA of the report, because I'm sure that you want to provide true data, and you want to provide dashboard that will solve the questions you or your colleagues have. So let's start with the in-depth explanation. And the first step is planning. So the first question you should ask yourself or client or to your colleagues, depending on who has shared the task with you, is what is the purpose of the report? What's the idea why you are making it? Some questions that can help you to clarify this is, for example, whether the report is meant to represent some kind of data, or it's meant to be analyzed. Also, the purpose is defined by the fact who will read the report. Whether if it's, for example, some person from top-level management that does not have a lot of time, and he or she can just quickly review the report to spot the main, I don't know, for example, main KPIs, but this person should not spend time on investigating like more detailed facts or data points. However, maybe the report is built for yourself, so you could do exactly the analysis in the report, and that will show that you could add some extra filters in the report, or segments that you can work with in time of this analysis. As I said, the third question is how much time can be spent on the report, whether you have, for example, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 1 hour, or maybe you can work with it for some 8 hours. The second question is what data is needed to reach the purpose of the report. And usually when I receive a task to prepare a Data Studio report, I'm usually asking for like, what kind of questions do you expect to solve with this kind of report? And based on these questions, you will clearly understand what kind of data points you need to include in the report. Also, it will show not only the exact data points, but also how much of those data points you need. And based on these data points, you can understand how complex it will be to connect the sources and to create charts. Because, for example, if you will need to connect let's say 2 data sources that already has built-in connector in Google Data Studio. However, you might need to blend them. It already will take a bit more time. But if you will need to use a third-party data tracking tool, then you might need to spend some time on making you will need to spend some time on formatting your spreadsheets in which those data from this third-party tool will be added. Here is my kind of a sketch of how do I usually start this planning process. So in this case, it was about yearly report. It was for an e-commerce store we do work with, and it's kind of a retailer for our team. Therefore, the purpose was to see how the KPIs have changed since we have started to work with them. And the audience of the report was client, which definitely does not have much time to read the report. Also, I noted questions I want to give answers to. And usually in this kind of sketches, I do share some kind of comments and ideas, just some random ideas. For example, color scheme I want to use. For example, some kind of charts I want to include. This kind of chart might take a bit more time to prepare. Therefore, I already know that this could show me the biggest insights. However, I need to investigate how can I prepare such chart. And again, here is some note for me that I should clearly show the insights instead of leaving space for further analysis. And here comes the next step. This step, like from my experience, I strongly suggest to work on this step when you clearly understand the purpose of the report, because otherwise it will be like waste of time. You will start to add some kind of random metrics, random dimensions, and you will start to combine them, think if that really makes sense or it does not, and then it's kind of like it's just waste of time. Therefore, what you can do if you start to build the report, then you can decide whether you can use a template or you want to create a new report. There are 4 options. Then there is Google Data Studio Gallery, which provides quite a lot of reports. You can just choose template, copy it, add the data source you own, and do some adjusting. For example, I don't know, change colors, change some charts, or maybe add some comments blocks there. There are also plenty of templates shared online. The same steps, just create a copy and share and add your data source and adjust the template. After some time when working with Google Data Studio and creating new reports, I'm pretty sure that you will have your own templates. At least we do have our own templates. I like to work with templates. For example, if we do have a new client, and then to understand the overall situation in his e-commerce store, I just copy previously prepared template. It does not even matter if I need all the dashboards in the report. I know that there are specific dashboards that will help me to understand how the store's been doing. And it takes, I don't know, some maybe 10 minutes to add the correct data source. And of course, if I want to adjust specific data points, then it might take more. But for the overall impression, that's very good. And of course, the final option is that you can create a new report. And further, I will discuss, but I will focus more on how to create new report. So after you have decided to create a new report, you can think about how many dashboards actually to include in the report. At this point, you should remember my example with around 35 dashboards, which is definitely not what I would suggest. No, and also if more dashboards you will have, that will significantly increase the load speed of the report. So yes, what you should consider, of course, you should think about how many data points do you have, what kind of charts, how many charts you will have in your dashboard, in your report, and maybe you have some comments. Because for a long time, we avoided to include any text blocks in our reports. But by time we realized that actually it's pretty comfortable to have this kind of block in the same dashboard. Because, for example, if in the fold you are showing the charts and this data visualizations, then by, for example, scrolling down, the report reader can simply find the most important insights gathered in this dashboard, and it's very easy to use. Or you can, for example, add the final dashboard only with text block. And so don't be afraid to use it. And the fifth point is finally when you can start to think about placement of charts. However, when working on this point, I suggest you to follow a couple of visibility principles. So let's start. Further, I will share two dashboards in the same screen. On the left side will be shared the bad example, but on the right side will be shared a dashboard that is adjusted accordingly this visibility principle. As I said before, the data used in these dashboards, they are Google Analytics sample data. So you definitely should not pay any attention to data points because they are just random data points. And I would suggest more to focus on how do you find to perceive the information placed in those dashboards. So the first principle is less is more. As I already said in my bad example that firstly I wanted to include everything in a single dashboard because it's amazing. Data is amazing, and you can find so many good things in the data. But from the visibility perspective and ability to find insights you can work on, and I would say even the speed, how can you find those insights? It's not so effective. Therefore, let's see the examples. So on the left side, you can see, I would say, many scorecards. There is the shopping behavior funnel, some kind of timeline charts with, I would say, the most important KPIs of any e-commerce store. Here is some information about performance regarding device type, and of course about traffic acquisition. It looks kind of cool. However, by reducing the amount of charts added, you can increase the speed and the focus on important details. So here I have removed actually only 4 scorecards, which are not so important to be placed in the first dashboard. Of course, the shopping behavior funnel is important, therefore we kept it at the same place. However, we made the color a bit darker, so it would maybe not be the first element noticed on the dashboard. Also, I reduced the amount of timeline charts because they do take a lot of space. They're quite similar, and the revenue can be found here as well. And also, I removed already a bit detailed information about device types, and I kept only the most important metrics in this table. I know that it will be pretty difficult to remove something because everything will seem super important. But if you want to find those insights quickly, then I definitely recommend you to prioritize the data you want to include. And actually, the solution can be also to make this dashboard only longer. So again, there are options. The second principle I suggest to follow is about chart placement. So again, the same dashboard on the left side, and here scorecards are in the same place. what I removed is this shopping behavior funnel. I placed it at the bottom because from perspective of priorities, it's not so important as, for example, the main KPIs. I reduced the size of table for this traffic acquisition, again, because it's not so important. Here in timeline chart, I combined two metrics in the same chart. Therefore, I have more space and I can prolong this chart. And it means that on the top right corner, I do have an extra space that I can use for more segmented data. And basically, it's the KPIs for device types. And I believe that in this chart, you could you need less effort to find the place where you can focus on, and it should be easier to perceive the information shared here because it also has more space. The third thing is size of elements. If you look at the right dashboard, then I'm pretty sure that the first metric you notice is the conversion rate. And when we talk about e-commerce website, the conversion rate, of course, it's like the most important metric you measure. And yes, so I would say that it's pretty easy to achieve the goal with again with like prioritizing the information in your dashboards and emphasizing the most important elements. What's been done in this dashboard? The least important elements are in the same position. However, I removed this pie chart here at the middle right section. I removed user behavior KPIs, but below this super important metric, I placed a timeline chart with the same metric. I placed near this important metric like explanatory metrics, and again, I had a space in the dashboard. Therefore, I decided that we could include a combined chart with again the most important metrics. This is sessions. At the bottom is conversion rate, and here is bounce rate. But it's sorted by device types, and it kind of correlates again with the most important metric. So if there is something important you want to show, then use the size of elements and make it bigger. However, again, I'm sure that you will consider majority of your data points super important, but of course, I suggest you to prioritize them and choose like truly the most important elements. And the next one is grouping. Grouping is, for this example, I needed to change the left example. Here, it's like random data points all around the dashboard. Some scorecards here, some here, some here. Some information about device type here, some here. And at this point, it's like very difficult to understand the flow of the report. And again, what's the most important information in the report? Where should user or the reader of the report to focus on? And it takes kind of a lot of effort to understand what and where should be looked at. However, in this report, you already see that it's pretty simple. Here you can see e-commerce KPIs. Here are user behavior KPIs. Here are metrics by device type. This is a timeline chart, and this is again like the same metrics. The next principle is about colors. First thing you should think about is that if you use a specific color to explain a specific, for example, metric, then it should be followed in your dashboard in the same way, because then user will simply remember about them. He will not need to focus on understanding which color it means which dimension or metric, but he can, based on his previous experience, he will remember that, oh, okay, I simply can follow colors, and that will, then I can understand everything, that he does not need to read to maybe the meaning of the metrics and dimensions. And in the right side example, you can see that the conversion rate is in pink. The same pink is used in the timeline chart. Here, actually, at the bottom, which is a line of conversion rate, and it's also in pink, and the same is in the table. Also here, sessions are in gray, and here are gray as well. What I would suggest is, if you have more than one pie chart in your dashboard, then make sure that the dimensions in all of those pie charts also are in the same color. There are I think around 3 methods how you can define colors and dimensions, but if you have assigned color to the order of dimension, then you might need to change it in your next chart. So the same color would mean the same dimension. Example here, I would say purple, bluish purple color means desktop, and it's the highest amount of sessions, which means that the first dimension will be in this bluish pink color. And here we needed to make adjustments in this chart, and to be sure that also the second dimension, based on the amount, would be also in the same color. So it would mean desktop. Otherwise, in this chart, this part would be bluish pink, and that means actually mobile. Speaking about the colors, in my examples, all dashboards were black. Black dashboards looks awesome. They look very impressive. However, when you are building dashboards, I strongly suggest you to think about how easy it might be for a reader to perceive the information in the dashboard. For example, when I'm building dashboards, I usually try to use white background, because for me, this black color takes a lot of effort and to actually focus on this dashboard. Instead, when it's white, I can easily find all the elements there. And of course, when thinking about colors, I suggest you to follow brand colors you are working with, and it's I think it's a great starting point to choose the color scheme. Speaking about the color scheme, I suggest to visit this website. It's for me, it's super simple to use, and it shares a lot of ideas you can follow. So let's wait until it loads. Basically, it provides you a color scheme with 5 colors. And by simply pressing spacebar, you can change the schemes. And let's say that you see that this green color looks super awesome, and you want to have it in your report, but you don't like the rest 4 colors. So what you can do, you can lock this one. Again, press space, and others will change. You see that, for example, this red, it looks kind of cool, but still it's too bright. So we can, for example, let's change the saturation of it so it would be a bit more dark. And you can do it simply here. Then you can just copy the code and add it in your dashboard. And the final step is QA. I would say that usually people do forget about this step, because it's like if you have spent on building the report for about let's say 8 hours, then you are kind of used to this report, and of course you will think that everything looks great, and for you the report works fine. However, it's strongly suggested to check if the data included in your report do match with the data in the original data source. There might be many reasons why there are differences. However, it's for the best to check if all is good. Also, at this point, actually, you already can share the report with some of your colleagues. So he would share his opinion about the report. First of all, you should check if everything really makes sense. If it's easy to understand, which, for example, this dimension explains. Like which chart explains which dimensions, and if the placement of the report allows the reader to quickly spot those insights. And also you need to check if everything added in the report is relevant. Again, you can remember about the questions the report should answer and about the report's purpose. And you can make sure that there is no extra information added, and the report will help you to achieve its goal. So what you can, that's basically it about step-by-step guide. To remind you, they were 3 simple steps. The first one was about planning, about deciding on the purpose of the report and what data to include. And the second step is about building the report, about those visual principles to follow, about methods, how to create the reports, and finally, it's about QA, to be completely sure that you do not provide false data and that your dashboard is helping for someone to achieve some kind of goal. This webinar, I wanted to finalize with some beautiful quote about how data visualizations are important and why should you use them. And in time of looking for this inspirational quote, I had opened in another screen Google Data Studio website and their main landing page. And I noticed that actually they do have a very beautiful quote, which says that your data is beautiful, use it. And I think it perfectly explains the power of the data, and that by using this tool, it's so easy to dress your data in interactive dashboards and cool data visualizations that will help you to achieve your team's goals. So that's it about the topic, and now it's time for Q&A. So okay. Here are some questions. Hello, Sebastian. Okay, so the first question is how long it usually takes you to build one of these reports, and when you started and now. Yeah, when I started, I spent a lot of time. I'm not sure if I want to say exact amount of time I spent on it, but it was kind of hard investigation on everything. But now I do usually, it depends from amount of dashboards and this complexity of combining data sets. If I can use a simple Google Analytics data source and I don't need to do much of data blending, then I usually, and for example, for a single page dashboard, well, I can make a dashboard in an hour, but it again depends if I need to do some analysis of the data or no. Therefore, I don't know, but for our clients, we do usually share time, I would say some 8 hours. That's kind of usual estimate for us. But then it can include, I think, but that also includes data analysis as well. So the next question is, does Google Data Studio support charts for multidimensional data sets? I kind of will not be able to answer for this question. I might need to do a bit more in-depth in investigation. But if you could share some kind of example, maybe. Yeah, but what I can say is that Google Data Studio has those community visualizations, and they do have some kind of this type of specific visualizations there. I can't precisely name what kind of visualizations they do have, but they're very, very creative, and they are very interesting. From Facebook and Twitter, for that, you will need to have a specific connector. I know that there are companies that do provide those connectors. However, you might need to pay for them. Okay, so if there is no other question, then that would be it from my side. If you have any other question, and then you can definitely write it to me. As I said, my name is Jana, and I do work at Scandiveb. So my email is pretty simple. So feel free to write us. And another thing I wanted to mention in this webinar is that soon we will release an ebook about Google Data Studio and how to make cool reports in Google Data Studio. The majority of things I shared in this webinar will be written in this ebook. So if you want to remember them, then I would suggest you to visit our website and find out when we will release the ebook. Yeah, after the webinar, we will send you an email with links to the recordings, so you can review the presentation again. Yes, so that's it from my side. Thank you for listening, and I hope you had a great time. Thank you. Goodbye.